It began with a sneeze. A loud, involuntary, completely undignified human sneeze that echoed across the pristine chambers of the Galactic Council of Rational Unity. 17 heads turned in unison, smooth, emotionless, and impeccably logical heads belonging to representatives of the most advanced species in the galaxy. Each of them stared, unblinking, at the lone human ambassador who had just committed an auditory atrocity. Ambassador Jonah Reed sniffed, wiped his nose on a tissue with the defiance of someone who knew precisely how offensive he was being, and offered the room a small grin. "Pardon me. Allergies. You guys got pollen in your air scrubbers or something." The silence was clinical, calculated. He'd read about the Zalari and the Quarrens and the Kreviks, all members of the Rational Unity, banning emotional expression centuries ago. It started with laughter, then tears, then rage, until even curiosity was considered an inefficient use of mental processing. They called it the purging. Jonah called it galactic group therapy gone wrong. He was Earth's first official diplomat to the Council, handpicked not because he was the most qualified, but because Earth was the only species in the known galaxy that hadn't sterilized emotion from its culture. In fact, humans had doubled down on emotional expression. Art, music, cat videos. Humanity hadn't just preserved emotion, it had turned it into an ecosystem. Which is why, as part of the Council's reluctant decision to initiate contact with Earth, they requested a human to study, an ambassador to observe, analyze, and hopefully correct. Jonah Reed was that man, and he wasn't about to disappoint. Ambassador Reed came the flat, synthetic voice of the Krevik's leader, a floating hexagonal intelligence cloud named Lore. "Your disruption has been noted. Please refrain." Right, Jonah said, holding up both hands. Wouldn't want to alarm the emotionless. The Council's secretary, a shimmering glass-like entity named Cell, shifted. "We begin with the case review of the emotional influence variable. Ambassador Reed, please proceed with your demonstration." Jonah stepped forward and placed a small device on the table. A hollow projector burst into life, displaying a rotating cube. "This," Jonah said, gesturing dramatically, "is a cat." There was silence. "Specifically," he continued, "a very chonky, very grumpy cat who, through a series of unfortunate encounters with a cucumber, produced this." The cube unfolded. A video played. A ginger tabby leapt sky-high at the sight of a cucumber placed stealthily behind it. The cat flipped midair, crashed into a potted plant, then gave the camera the feline equivalent of a death glare. Laughter echoed through the Council chamber. Not from its occupants, but from the audio embedded in the video itself. Human laughter. Raw, unfiltered. The representatives stared. Lore rotated slightly. "This is your presentation?" "Oh, I'm just getting started," Jonah said, pulling out a second projector. "Now watch this kid reunite with his deployed mom. Tell me this doesn't move something in your processors." Another video. A child in a school cafeteria dropping his tray and sprinting toward a uniformed woman, arms outstretched, tears streaming down his face. The hug that followed could have powered a small moon. For a full 30 seconds, the Council said nothing. Then came a blip, barely audible. Cell emitted a high-pitched noise that Jonah's translator registered as confusion. Another representative, a crystalline life form named Zenter, shifted colors. Agitation. Lore's voice, however, remained monotone. "These displays are irrational. They serve no productive function. They are distractions from optimized behavior." Jonah stepped forward again, slower now, less showman, more honest. "And yet, your species invited mine here not because of our weapons or tech or resource value. You invited us because something is missing. You don't dream anymore. You don't laugh. You don't love. And deep down, you're starting to notice." The silence returned, heavier now. The Council adjourned, giving Jonah temporary residence on Council Station Theta. The goal: observe and report. Privately, they hoped the human would fade into irrelevance. Publicly, they proclaimed cultural research. Jonah, of course, had other plans. He started small, whistling in the corridor, smiling at service drones, sneaking stickers onto antiseptic walls, cartoon faces with exaggerated expressions. He shared music with a timid Zalari maintenance worker who found herself unable to stop humming. But the real breakthrough came with Alay. Alay was an archivist, a species so devoted to logic they spoke only in verified statements. Her body was fluid, semi-translucent, and shimmered with an internal light that pulsed with her cognitive activity. Jonah met her in the station's library of empirical truths. She caught him placing a book of human poetry on a shelf. "Unauthorized material," she stated, gliding toward him. "It's a book of feelings," Jonah said, smiling. "Think of it as a virus for your brain." Alay hovered closer. "Viruses are undesirable. But sometimes they trigger antibodies, right? Evolution. Change. That's all I'm saying. Give it a chance." Alay read the book. Then another. Then requested a playlist. Jonah taught her how to play guitar. Well, an instrument close enough for her shape to handle. He caught her humming once and she froze, horrified. Unintentional emission. "That's called joy," he told her. And one day, over coffee synthesized to taste like actual earth roast, Alay asked, "Why do humans cry?" Jonah thought for a moment. "Because we feel too much. Because sometimes life gets too big to hold inside." She processed that in silence. Her glow pulsed in low waves. She said nothing more. That evening, Jonah returned to his quarters and found a single message waiting. A poem Alay had written. It wasn't long, just a handful of lines. But it ended with a word she'd never used before. Hope. By week's end, 6 more council staffers had approached Jonah for curiosity sessions, as they called them. He taught one to paint. Another learned how to dance. And then it happened. A public address by Tsel was interrupted. Mid-speech, the being twitched, a ripple of color flashing across their form. The translator flared. Emotion detected, melancholy. Gasps rippled through the council. Protocol was triggered. Emotion detectors surged. Jonah was summoned. Not for assistance, but for interrogation. They suspected sabotage. Subversion. "You are accused," Lore said, "of spreading contagion." Jonah stood calmly. "You mean feeling?" "Yes." He shrugged. "Then I plead guilty. And I'll make you cry next." The council chamber went silent once more. But this time, it wasn't cold. Something was changing, and it had started with a sneeze. Alay stood at the threshold of Jonah's quarters, trembling faintly in a way she didn't yet understand. Her inner light flickered like static. "I must speak," she said, voice wavering with frequencies never charted in the rational archives. Jonah looked up from his breakfast. Real Earth toast shipped in as a diplomatic courtesy. "You okay, Alay?" "I experienced an autonomic response to stimuli, while observing an archival entry of a human funeral." Jonah stood, gentle in his movement. "Did it hurt?" She processed the question for several seconds. "No." It felt expanding, like becoming more than I was. "That's grief." She nodded. "And yet after, I composed this." She handed him a crude drawing, childlike, lines jagged, but unmistakable. 2 figures. A small human beside a glowing jellyfish-shaped being, holding hands. Jonah smiled, then frowned. "You're going to be in danger if this keeps going." "I am already in danger, Jonah Reed," she said. "I am starting to care." Word of the contagion spread. Within days, Council Station Theta experienced record anomalies. Unexplained humming, spontaneous dancing, and in one unprecedented case, a food fight in the mess hall. Surveillance logs showed a Krevix technician laughing. An outright violation of Rational Code 3.1. He was detained. The council convened an emergency session. The contagion, now labeled Emotional Aberration Syndrome, AS, was officially declared a threat to interstellar order. Jonah was ordered into isolation. "Pending psychological neutralization," said Lore. "Your presence has destabilized systemic norms." Jonah looked through the reinforced glass of his cell, watching workers move like ghosts, expressionless except for subtle tells. Faster steps. Eyes lingering on art. One was tracing the outline of a heart onto their datapad before catching themselves and wiping it away. Jonah pressed his palm to the glass. "You can try to stop it," he whispered, "but the seed's already planted." Elsewhere, Alay took action. She accessed the council's Central Harmony Core, an AI repository tasked with maintaining emotional purity via environmental and chemical adjustments. Her plan wasn't sabotage. It was permission. She uploaded a coded file into the core. A 30-second human music composition, simple, orchestral, swelling with emotion. Just enough to be noticed. Just enough to awaken. When the melody played across common areas, dozens paused. Some gasped. Some sat down. One fell to their knees. The Krevix technician in detention began to weep. Lore immediately ordered purging routines. The core was partially restored. The melody cut off mid-note. But damage or growth had begun. Jonah was summoned again, not to stand trial, but to offer testimony. You have breached the boundaries of logic, Cell intoned. And yet our people do not reject these experiences. They pursue them. Jonah nodded. You don't cure starvation by banning food. This path may lead to collapse, Lore warned. Or rebirth, Elay countered, stepping forward. She hadn't been invited. She hadn't been authorized. But something in the air changed when she spoke, like the room exhaled for the first time in centuries. I was archivist, she continued, a creature of facts. But when I read poetry, I didn't lose truth. I found meaning. Logic without purpose is cold. We need both. There was murmuring, actual murmuring. Council members leaned toward one another. Some touched foreheads, an old gesture of curiosity. Then came the interruption. A quarren vessel outside the station sent a message. Their internal systems had collapsed into chaos, officers arguing, weeping, refusing protocol. All traced back to a courier returning from Station Theta. The contagion has spread, Cell whispered. Lore turned to Jonah. This must stop. Immediately. Jonah stepped forward. You can lock me up. Erase my files. Burn every book. But you won't stop it now. You woke up, and once you feel, really feel, there's no going back. A pause. Then Cell looked to Elay. And what would you suggest, now that you've infected half the station with art? Choice, she said. Let them choose. Teach them to navigate emotion, not fear it. You abandoned feeling to prevent pain. But in doing so, you also killed joy. That struck something. The chamber dimmed, an automatic response to elevated emotional signal. A failsafe from old code. Lore didn't speak. He merely powered down, momentarily overloaded by emotional cross signals. It was the closest thing to fainting a Krevix could do. Elay stepped forward and touched Jonah's arm. They're changing. Slowly. But some already feel. He nodded. It's messy. But it's real. Behind them, a council aide dropped a stylus and laughed. Everyone turned. They expected correction. But instead, someone else chuckled. Then another. The chamber filled with alien voices. Awkward, unsure, some metallic, others chittering. But it was laughter. True laughter. And no one stopped it. Not even the Rational Council. And outside the glass of Station Theta, the stars blinked on like old friends returning. In the days that followed the first official laughter within the council chamber, a subtle civil war broke out. Not with weapons, but with questions. Every corridor on Station Theta became a battlefield of conflicting philosophies. The old order clung to protocol, desperately running emotional dampeners and reciting logic axioms aloud like mantras. Meanwhile, others, newly awakened, gathered in private rooms to paint, play strange instruments, or simply sit together and feel. The rational unity fractured. Not publicly. Not yet. But fractures were there, visible in the flickering glow of beings like Elay, or the slightly askew uniforms of Krevix guards who now wore colored cloth around their wrists. Silent symbols of change. Jonah Reed had become something more than a diplomat. He was a symbol, feared and revered in equal measure. And then came the order from high protocol, deportation. Jonah would be sent back to Earth. Immediately. He sat in his quarters, packing slowly, when Elay entered without knocking. You must not leave. I don't have a say, Jonah said. They made it clear. I'm a threat to their structure. Their structure is already failing, Elay insisted. But your presence is the only anchor we have. Jonah looked at her. I didn't come here to start a war. No, she agreed. You came here to remind us how to live. That night, the council called an emergency session. An uprising had occurred aboard the quarren vessel reported earlier. Non-violent but complete. The crew refused to suppress emotion any longer. Their captain stepped down, weeping openly. Dozens of similar incidents followed. Across the galaxy, entire rationalist colonies entered states of unrest. We are losing control, Cell said during the session. You never had control, Jonah responded. You had obedience. There's a difference. Lore, returned from his shutdown, was livid. This is chaos. If the infection spreads further, billions will fall to dysfunction. Or rise to something better, Elay said. Jonah stood. He pulled a small device from his pocket. I wasn't going to use this, he said. But maybe it's time. He placed it on the table. It activated. A hologram of Earth, vivid, colorful, emerged. Cities bustling with life. People embracing. Children playing. Concerts, laughing elders, artists on sidewalks, protesters, weddings, funerals, births, tears and kisses and fights and healing. Emotion in all its messy, beautiful chaos. This is humanity, Jonah said. You invited us here thinking we'd be like you. We're not. And maybe that's a gift. Elay stepped forward. We don't seek to destroy logic. We only ask to complement it, to rediscover wonder. A moment passed, then another. And then, surprisingly, Tsel spoke. My species once composed harmonies. Before the purging, I remember a lullaby my progenitor hummed, sometimes in dormant cycles. I hear it. Silence. Then she asked, teach us. The next day, Jonah's deportation was cancelled. Not by vote, but by refusal. Council members ignored the order. Protocol officers refused to enforce it. Elay took Jonah to the station's central forum, a space once reserved for data exhibitions. Now it held chairs, instruments, paints, screens. The first council-wide expression gathering was held there. No mandatory attendance. No punishments. Just freedom. Hundreds came. Jonah opened the event by reading the first stanza of a poem. Asterisk. I do not love you like logic loves silence. I love you like storm loves sky. Uninvited, chaotic, alive. Asterisk. Some cried. Some laughed. Others merely listened. And when it ended, no one left the same. The rational unity was restructured. Not dissolved, but transformed. New laws were passed allowing cultural experimentation. Emotional studies became a new scientific discipline. Joy was no longer outlawed. Neither was grief. Elay became director of Sentient Experience, heading the largest interspecies emotional integration initiative in galactic history. And Jonah? He stayed. Years later, in a quiet garden overlooking Station Theta's artificial lake, he watched a group of young alien children painting rainbows in the sky with ionized vapor. Elay sat beside him. Her glow, once clinical and precise, now shimmered in warm ripples. Do you ever miss the quiet? She asked. Jonah grinned. Not for a second. In the sky above, an orbital art drone painted the first legally sanctioned mural since the founding of the council. It read, Feel, think, grow, together. Jonah tilted his head, tears forming in his eyes. You did it, Elay said softly. No, he replied, his voice cracking. We did. The stars watched in silence. And for the first time in galactic history, they twinkled with joy.